All right. How's it going, everybody? So this is a dress rehearsal for Common Ground's 10th anniversary that's going to be held on October 23rd. So it is currently 4:40 a.m. in the morning, so I do apologize if words just sound like bleh. um, but we're going to do this. We're going to do this, I promise. So let's begin. So hello, everyone. So my name is V Sung Jin, but my friends call me V. And today I want to talk about some of the projects that I'm working on and some of the projects that I'm displaying today too as well, and how it really ties into this theme of radical love. So a little brief introduction of who I am. So I'm a visual storyteller. And what that means is that I like to tell stories, right? So my form of medium is photography. It's either photography, sometimes videography, and occasionally it will be through interview style, so like podcast. And it's something that I've been very, very passionate about for a very young age. Um, when I'm not telling stories or when I'm not taking photography, I work as a registered nurse. So I work at night. I work as a night shift nurse where I work on a cardiac floor as well as at a COVID-19 unit floor here in Southern Oregon at a rural hospital. And I've recently been a nurse for about 7 months. I'm super fresh and always constantly learning. And I always find it very similar how two of these things, both nursing and visual storytelling, really sort of align. And it's this curiosity to build human connections with people. But that's a different topic for a different day. So before we talk about some of the works that I'm working on, I want to briefly kind of tell you a little bit about my own history, right? My own lineage. So my parents are Vietnamese boat people, just like a lot of many Vietnamese parents or family or people who were affected by the Vietnam War, a lot of Southeast Asians. So my parents have escaped Vietnam on a boat 3 times. The third time was successful, and they were on a boat with 30 plus people, a very small boat. They were there for about 7 days and 7 nights. And they finally arrived at Galang refugee camp. Um, and that was actually located in Indonesia, actually where I was born. So some of the photos you're seeing here is photos that are taken of my family here in Galang refugee camp. And ever since I've heard that story from my parents, it's always been very intriguing. And it's a story that I would hear really throughout the entire trajectory of my life. And every time I hear it, I always learn something new. Because my parents tell me that story of how they came here to the States, that love for storytelling was planted at a very early on age. So, with that said, photography was really my primary outlet of continue telling that story and continue of displaying that love for for narrative, right? And I really started taking photography seriously when I started taking pictures in the street or street photography for the say. And the reason why I really love street photography is really because there isn't any rule. It's an open playground for you to go out there and just really kind of explore your own style, your own way of telling your narrative. And there's always a story waiting to be told. All right. It's all about being very mindful and be very present of the current situation. So street photography was really where I learned how to kind of learn the mechanics and the concepts and building that love for storytelling through visual media. One of my first projects I work on is called My Chinatown. And My Chinatown is a photo project that focuses on capturing day to day life in 3 different cities um, of different Chinatown community. One was in Los Angeles, then San Francisco, and then most recently Portland, Oregon. And the reason why I picked Chinatown was ever since my family immigrated to California, Chinatown was one of the first cities that we felt truly connected to. And it's a city where, we're not be surrounded by a lot of homogenized white people, but we were surrounded by people that looked like us. So there's a sense of security and a sense of safeness, right? And so, when I was like 4 years old, I remember a lot of my fond memories was being in Chinatown even my little brother was born in Chinatown. So a lot of my early memories was around in Los Angeles Chinatown, skipping through the sidewalks, throwing little pop-ups on the ground, um, tasting wonderful, delicious, a lot of Asian cuisine. It was a very fond memory for me. And so I wanted to kind of honor that nostalgic memory by continuing taking more photos of day-to-day people that I meet in Chinatown. The next project that I worked on is called The Stories We Carry. And The Stories We Carry was actually kind of stemmed from being very isolated in a new city. So when I moved to Portland, Oregon, and back in 2018 through 2019, um, it was a city where I didn't really know a lot of people. And because I miss home and because I identify a lot of home through my own Vietnamese identity, I wanted to find a way to connect with other people who identify themselves as immigrant and refugees. And so um, I started this project, The Stories We Carry, with my friend Andy, as a way of meeting different people who actually shared a lot of similarities in terms of being someone who came from an immigrant to refugee family. And so pretty much the idea is very simple. I asked different people if they can bring a particular photo of their parents or an object or something that really means a lot to them, that tells their own story, and carry that in their hand. And it's literally like a story that they carry. So it's a project that is very dear to me, and it's something that I hope to continue as well. And then finally, this project that I work on is called Silk Rise. Now, Silk Rise is a completely different type of project that I've worked on in the sense that it's less serious, but it's more fun, and it's also a way of celebrating um, the Vietnamese tradition dress, the Ao Dai. And so this project was also started here in Portland too, as well, where I basically worked with my friend Olivia, where we connected with different people who identify as Vietnamese to really rock out that Ao Dai in a lot of different ways to kind of give it more of a street credibility, right? Because sometimes when we think of Ao Dai, we think of a very more traditional, very proper way of wearing it. And so we really kind of want to challenge that traditional way of thinking when wearing a traditional garment. Okay, so let's continue to the main show. So, when this concept of radical love was recently presented to me by Common Grounds, I have to admit it was very foreign to me, one that really struck my curiosity to dig a little deeper into Bell's Hook work. So, when I picked up All About Love and read it for the first time last week, everything that I digested felt very familiar to me. It was nostalgic, the emotions that brew within me for many years. I had all these different feelings, but I wasn't really sure how to process that into words. Love, quote unquote, as Bell mentioned, it doesn't really have a unified definition. And I think because of this, love over the years has been very, very confusing. It's oftentimes used pretty lightly too, right? We say, I love you, I love you, I love you. We kind of throw it around. Or sometimes we're not using it enough, right? So it's where we find that balance. And I think specifically here in our generation, the cross spectrum, we engage even more so in lovelessness. To me, to give love really requires one ability to receive love, right? So for me, receiving love comes primarily through working within myself, through self care. And it's something that you cannot project radical love to community if you don't really start within yourself. So, what does self care mean to me? And how does it relate to some of the work I produced in the past? So, when Bell Hook wrote, and I paraphrase, when Bell Hook wrote that self care cannot flourish in self isolation, that to me was very profound. You cannot gain strong communion with the world around you if you confine yourself in isolation. And so that brings me to an experience when in November 2019, pre COVID years, in November 2019, when I went back home to the motherland in Vietnam, um, Vietnam is a very interesting place for me. Vietnam has always been a place of familiarity and foreignness to me. Okay, it's very oxymoron. Um, I look Vietnamese, but never Vietnamese enough to integrate into the community. Right? I was uncomfortable of being close to another Vietnamese, both physically and emotionally, and really shying away from this idea of proximity, right? Proximity of 10 million Vietnamese bodies confined in a city no bigger than Los Angeles, right? Known as Saigon. Here in the States, it's completely different. Here, Americans, we're obsessed with this idea of compartmentalization, right? Borders, division. We're taught to respect other spaces and not invade their personal bubbles. We have increased segregations of socioeconomic classes, different races, different political views, right? We have a president administration who is completely obsessed of building walls to segregate borders upon nations. Shoot, we even have like those little checkout dividers at a supermarket to make sure that our neighbor's purchase doesn't get mixed up with ours. So we're obsessed with like division, with borders, with lines across things upon things. So when I was in Vietnam, that really challenged my Americanness. So in these visuals that you're seeing right now, this is my attempt of proximity, right? Of being comfortable in the uncomfortableness, of coming out of my own isolation, of embracing vulnerability, and really being comfortable of my own unique Vietnamese American dual identity. Okay. It's about self acceptance, self care, and most importantly, self love. So these next clips is essentially me processing these experiences, and these are actually video clips that I recorded that is being juxtaposed with some short poetries that describe about my really my current thought process at that given moment. And a lot of these themes are kind of focusing on, of course, identity crisis, coming into terms of being a Vietnamese American who is not completely proficient in English, being as well as uncomfortable being with another person, grief. So let's roll the tape. Lips locked, our teeth clenched into a fortified wall, where our collided lifeless bodies lay to rest. On your breath, the smell of palm tree and banana leaves digged into my chest as I watched my flesh peeled into a pile of catfish scale. Bones clinged onto each other where calcified ash and napalm blood revealed the pulsating fruit. You called out for me, yet each time the sound is dampened by the crimson juice that hangs on your lips, dripping onto the flesh till it turned into a pitch black. Yet, forgive me if my tongue does not curl into the shape of your name, for I am still working on shaping it into my own. You speak to me, not through the sounds of brittle bones, but through the smell of incense, thick, gray, Ash seeps through the crevice of my teeth, where the shadow binds onto my ankle, bringing me back to a time of fond yesteryear. I recall that one summer, you taught me how to light my first incense. Never in even number, but always in odds, representing eternal and prosperity. As you draw the incense close to your lips, I watch the smoke slowly takes its shape. Milky veins forms the very outline of our ancestors' body. This is how we will communicate one day. This is how I will communicate to you. As I lay my feet deep into the sand, allowing the force of the wave to pull me further into the caramel water, my flesh severed into two. One who was raised by the Mekong Delta, skin dark and sweet, under the bleeding sun, whose body was sculpted to cut through the sharpest nuke, whereas the other flesh, raised in the land where trees are cut into buildings, skin covered in grease and ash, fallen from the dying forest. Two separate flesh, both spawned from years of bloodshed. To what time and place will these two flesh amount into one? That night, when our All right, and that is the end of the presentation. So, Gamang Bang, thank you, friends, for giving your time to watch and listen and be part of this experience. I really appreciate everyone who showed up here. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at my email. I'll send out a kind of a brief caption of how you can contact me. So, thanks so much, and hopefully we'll catch each other on another show. Peace.